Okay. Call the meeting to order, and if we could do roll call.
Chair Gage. Sorry, blinds.
Sorry, present.
Committee members Oliver. Present. Lovelace.
Here.
Wolf. Edgerton. Hintermeister.
Here. Okay. Then the report of the chair. Right now I have nothing to report unless you want to hear more about the Garlic Festival.
Endangered species.
This may well have been the year where it's not on the endangered species list. Last year's heat and the lack of money from fewer people was making a lot of people worried. And this is the first time there was no parking where people could park and walk in. So look for there to be a parking charge next year. I will say though, we have upcoming event. This is through the Open Space Authority, the Coyote Valley Family Farming Feast. It's going to be held on September 19th at the newly opened Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve at 555 Palm Avenue. And they're going to have Happy Hollow Zoo folk there. And I don't see it's from 11 to 3. And you can come out and see one of the new crown jewels of Santa Clara County in the area. And then any advisory committee announcements? No. Hearing none, we'll keep moving on. And then item number 1 is approve the minutes, and we don't have a quorum, so we'll defer that. And we do expect more? We do expect more folk?
Don't know.
Okay.
Yes.
And you want to talk about the vacancies?
Absolutely.
And are people maybe speaking with their feet?
Yes. Hopefully not. I know Kyle. It's a work thing for Kyle. Yeah. But we have lost 2 members, Georgia and Jody. Yeah. Or not Jody. Liz. Thank you. Liz Cabrillo. And we are soliciting applications to fill both those positions. I was hoping Richard would be here today, but I'll talk to him independent to see if there's anybody from the business community, or if any of you know of anyone from the business community that could fill George's seat, to submit an application to us. Okay. We did get an application for the new director of the Farm Bureau.
Good.
And we will be submitting that to the board in September, recommending that they would take Liz's place.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because when I talked to him, he seemed interested, and we need a farm person who has a different set of, Kyle is pretty much, cattle and that kind of stuff, but he's got a much broader, outlook.
He does, and no, go ahead. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't see any reason why the board wouldn't approve his appointment, and hopefully we'll get somebody to take George's place sooner rather than later. Yeah.
And then Ed, you're up for the budget.
Yes. So. Thank you. So I'll stick here from the beginning. Sorry. So basically, it's not an action item. It's just to have you review it. Yes, to what we presented to the governing board in June, and they adopted the budget. So, but we're here to review it with you. I'll answer any questions you have. A lot of you were at the budget workshop, which was great to see you guys there. And you had some good ideas that we incorporated into the final budget report. So So I'll just go over the highlights, and then you can interrupt me during the presentation if you have any questions. So Habitat Agency goals and objectives. So the presentation outline is sort of in two parts. One is sort of highlighting the goals and objectives for the next fiscal year, which began July 1st and ends June 30th of next year. Summary of, and the second part of the presentation is sort of a summary of the proposed fiscal year 15-16 budget. So, being a JPA, we're almost like a startup company. You know, I know we're a public agency, but in a lot of ways, I feel like we're a private company creating new rules for ourselves. So we're in the process of developing financial policies for the agency. We're working with a CPA and the member organizations to come up with an array of policies, like when fees should be paid, how planned prep fees would be reimbursed to the partners, setting up a rainy day fund, coming up with, we already came up with the procurement rules for contracting, both for public works projects and for services. And there's a whole other array of financial policies that we'll be creating over the next 6 months. We're also going to create personnel policies. So right now we don't have these policies in place. And it takes up, and we're starting to, we're also in the beginning phases of developing a Black Mountain software package, which will be used to track all the fees, how they're collected, how they're spent, which is very important for our annual reporting, for AB 1600 reporting, and all the oversight that comes with being an agency that was scrutinized as much as we will be by both the federal, state, and local governments. So we're also creating 3 on-call consultant lists for restoration design, species monitoring and surveys, and property appraisals. So instead of doing RFPs continuously for these services, we'll have a suite of consultants, hopefully from 5 to 8 firms that we would choose to perform these various tasks. And the list would be good for 5 years, and then we go through the RFQ process, it's called, to then in case there's new firms out there or firms that didn't make the cut for the first time can have a fair chance to get on that list. So that'll streamline these ongoing, everyday tasks that'll become part of the implementation of the plan. As properties come up, we can just, instead of going an RFP to hire an appraiser, we'll just choose from hopefully a suite of firms that'll be able to perform those tasks.
Question on
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what is the process for kind of finding that list? Mm-hmm. Is there some kind of mini RFP where consultant firms would apply?
Yes, so we've submitted, so we have 2 on the street right now, the one for the restoration design and the one for property appraisals. And we asked East Contra Costa Conservancy of any firms that they work with doing those tasks. When I was in Placer County, I worked with a lot of firms that did restoration design. And so we just, so we let firms know that currently had bid on a past project for us, or firms that I'd worked with in the past, or firms that our partners have worked with, and let them know that this RFQ was up. We also have it on our webpage, and we asked our partners to distribute it to firms that they have worked with in the past too. So, with the RFP, we use something called BidSync, which the county has So it was broadcast through this California-wide bid processing. We didn't do that for this because it didn't quite fit the RFQ process.
I would just
versus an
want to make sure that
RFP.
we're not
Yeah.
open to any, charges of favoritism or
No.
anything like that.
Yes.
It's an open.
Yes, very
Kind of-
open.
kind of open
and,
process.
and the review panels for these will not just be me. So there'll be individuals from our partner agencies that'll help with choosing the firms that'll be on the on-call lists. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
And piggybacking a little on that.
Yes.
I'm also concerned about cost to the developer, because if we have, we want to make sure that we're getting, the very best we can in terms of environmental review and that, and suggestions on how to do it, but we also be cognizant that these costs are being borne by the applicant, and so moving forward on that. But with the personnel policies especially, we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
No, nor with the financial. Yeah, we just are going to hire a firm to write an employee handbook, and the same laws that apply to all public entities apply to us already. EEOC, harassment, those things are overarching rules that already apply, but just developing agency-specific personnel policies. So it's just creating those documents. Yeah, it won't be. And we got to write job descriptions too. So we're going to be hiring somebody. Hopefully, the job posting will go out next week or the following week to hire a principal program manager that'll be sort of taking over some of the responsibilities of the consultants that we have currently performing those duties and backing up Jill and I. And that'll be broadcast on a lot of environmental job pages and the American Planning Association job list. So, but we got to write a job description for that. I wrote a basic one up for the job posting, but we need to write up a formal, more legal one that protects the agency and protects the employee too. And then we've got to come up with an employee handbook. What are the rules? Right now, there's no issues. Jill's a great employee.
But you never know.
Right, but in the future, so just stuff, good business practices, and the same with the financial policies, the same. But it's not like if we were an arm of one of our partners, let's say like the county or Gilroy, we would be, all their policies would apply to us. We wouldn't have to develop anything. But we do have to, and some of their policies are more, and some, there's pluses and minuses with that. With these existing bureaucracies, they can be a bit onerous, some of the rules and regulations that have evolved over time. But on the plus side, you already got everything in place, and you're just tearing off of existing risk management and financial policies and personnel policies. So I want to create an organization that is not recreating a wheel, but also not copying policies and procedures that are inefficient and don't necessarily work for the organizations that even got to use them today. So,
yeah, no, I mean, because I'm involved in enough organizations that just because that's the way it's always been done, that I would prefer that we not do it just because it's been done that way, and eliminate rather than looking at add. But we do need to be specific about our needs.
yes. Like when I worked in Placer County, you couldn't work at home. Risk management for liability reasons, wouldn't allow employees to work at home. So
I slip on a skateboard.
yeah, exactly. So I don't, I want to offer that work at home option for employees, and that's something that would be stated in the employee handbook and agreed upon per, between me and that employee. So those are the kind of things I want to create an environment that's a good place to work and allows for some flexibility. And the financial policies are just real good housekeeping stuff. It's stuff we really have to do. So, but it'll be the CPA we're working with is public finance is his expertise. So he's working on the policies for us, and a lot of them will be the same that all jurisdictions or JPAs have. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So complete the land enrollment process for Coyote Ridge, Santa Clara County Parks, Calero, and OSA's Coyote Valley properties. So we have something called land in lieu of fees, both for public and private projects. So the county is enrolling current and new parklands into the reserve system, so the properties will be managed more intensely for species than they currently are, and in exchange for enrolling these lands in the reserve system, both OSA and the county will not have to pay land cover fees, and that's the trade-off. The same policies in place for the private sector. If there's a development that has land that we would really like to enroll in the reserve system, and it fits with the conservation goals and objectives of the plan, then they could develop, let's say, 100 acres and enroll 500 acres into the reserve system, and that would be a trade-off that would be advantageous for us. So these properties are all being enrolled in the reserve system, except for UTC Coyote Ridge. That's a new acquisition. So begin negotiations with the intent to acquire one or more properties. Execute a burrowing owl management agreement with the city of San Jose.
I've got a question.
Yes.
With regards to looking to acquire more properties, can you remind us, are those are obviously not the ones you were just
Correct.
talking about, and have they been identified those of priority interest for this year?
Yes, and in the EO report, I'll get into more details about negotiations with landowners.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So we're going to submit a Section 6 grant. The Coyote Ridge acquisition included a Section 6 grant, so it's an important seed money for helping to acquire reserve system lands. We're also going to solicit other state agencies to help fund acquisitions, so we'll be submitting grant applications. This is something that I would turn to Julie and Walt and others who have experience with the NGO community, but I'd like to start exploring reaching out to foundations and seeing if what kind of funding we could get, and this is where the individual who we're going to hire will really help me, because it'll free me up to meet with the Packard Foundation or the Moore Foundation or Post or some of these other groups to try to see how we can work more collaboratively together. So there's a local assistant grant programs where we have, so I got a little update on this presentation. I should have changed it. We have submitted 3 concept proposals to the state, and hopefully they'll all be approved for full proposal submittals. And these are kind of like scientific research grants. The agency got one last year for grazing and looking at ways to look at sort of environmentally friendly ways of grazing the land and doing some using more advanced remote sensing and even drones to assess grazing success and the amount of RDM that's going on the landscape. And the San Francisco Bay Estuary Institute with H.T. Harvey also is doing a sycamore alluvial study that we're helping to fund, and they were the recipients of the LAG grant also. And so it's not necessarily the agency in all cases submitting the LAG proposals, but because of the existence of the HCP, NCCP organizations, research organizations, the San Francisco Bay Estuary Institute or whoever can kind of tear off the existence of the plan to get funding to help with the scientific goals and objectives of this plan area implementation. The regional general permit to provide some integration of the 404 process with the ESA process. I'll get into more details with you on that in the EO report. We're almost done with it's just going to go to the board in September for the public sector land in lieu fee policy, a complete reserve system land management and monitoring plan, and then the Black Mountain financial accounting and tracking software integration. So those are things we want to do this next fiscal year, among others, and the budget will help us to accomplish those goals. So, yes.
I've always been very curious about the
Yes.
land in lieu of fees
Yes.
kind of question. Because,
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about having something soon for the public sector, but this is also the potential for private sector
Yes.
as well. I mean, you referred to that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, the private sector policy is already in place.
Well, that is.
Yes, and don't ask me why the public sector one wasn't completed. When my predecessor, they finished the private sector one first, and the public sector one was put on hold. So we started working on it this past late fall, and we have to go through a whole bunch of steps to get things approved by the wildlife agencies and the partner agencies. So we're finally at a point where now we can submit it to our board. So it's kind of the cart before the horse, because we're enrolling lands. We're in the process of enrolling public lands that are land in lieu, but we didn't have a policy in place yet, so we're catching up.
I guess the reason I was asking about that is I know during the stakeholder meetings that went on for I don't know how long, 6 or 8 years, or I can't remember anymore. But that was something that was always kind of interesting to me, and so I'd really like to see that, because I know that Jones and Stokes or ICF or whoever it was at the time, kind of they had some principles of conservation biology that had to do with how you kind of grouped land together. That is, in general, you wanted to, if you got land in lieu of something, you wanted to have it attached to some other property, so you'd have kind of maximize the volume per surface area, or some kind of criteria like that, basically to avoid getting little pieces of acreage that are all split up and spread out all over the place. So I would assume that this policy kind of covers those sorts of situations to make sure that
Yes.
that is really consistent with kind of the overall conservation value of the reserve system.
I can give you an example of a private project, Heritage Oak Cemetery, that wanted to do land in lieu.
Right.
And what they offered, I rejected based on conservation biology principles. too much surface area, not patch size, those
Right.
those adjacency.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those will be followed.
Okay.
And there's some rules. It has to be a priority, high priority or moderate priority acquisition criteria. So it's already has to be identified as either a high or moderate acquisition area. And so yes, so we would definitely be open to doing it with Heritage Oaks, but not the way they wanted to do it, because their cemeteries adjacent to the Coyote Valley site, the OSA Coyote Valley property. So if they offered up the right acreage, I think we could make it work with them. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So the general fund, what I have here is the summary of the proposed budget. So beginning fund balance as projected and as of June 30th of this year was slightly over $4 million, with estimated revenues of 6.3, and then the appropriations were 1 million, over 1 million, and the land acquisition reserve is 8, and the transfers to the reserve fund, so this is part of the financial policy implementation that I was referring to. And then there were the AB 1600 special revenues, which is the next line, and as you read down, it's nearly 800,000 in the beginning balance fund. Estimated revenues, and this is primarily Burrowing Owl monies, and was 4.4 million, and appropriations that would come out of this fund line, and then the land acquisition reserves coming out of this particular category, the AB 1600 special revenues, was 2 million. And then you see how much would be dedicated towards the endowment, and part of the financial policies that we're developing is how to invest the endowment monies. And then the totals are from the beginning balance of nearly 5 million, we're expecting estimated revenues of over 12, with an ending fund balance of next June of almost 3.1 million. So
I have a question on
Yes.
the endowment. So,
Yes.
it shows here on the let me see, I forgot which one. It's on page 2 of our report. So the budget, where it's more itemized together. It says 10.35% of fees for the endowment reserve fund.
correct.
I didn't have time to check into the plan if that is a set amount, where that amount was chosen, if that's flexible amount. How do we get about that percentage?
Yes, it was part of the financial planning back in when the plan was developed, and the final plan development in 2011, 2012, and it will be adjusted over time. There's a check-in every 5 years to make sure there's enough money in the endowment.
Okay.
So more.
That is set for the next 5
Yeah,
years until
yeah.
we do a review.
Yes.
Okay.
But it could, yeah, I'm expecting, based on preliminary discussions with Bob Spencer of Urban Economics, that it may increase, that the percentage that goes towards the endowment may increase.
Okay.
Hey, could I interrupt real quick? If you folks have any questions or anything to say, don't be shy, please. Thank you.
So these are the various fees. This is the land cover fees. And these are there's Zone A, Zone B, and Zone C. There's the serpentine fees, the nitrogen deposition fee, the western burrowing owl fee, and the wetland mitigation fee. Then there's also the participating special entities, which weren't signatories to the plan, but they are using the plan to mitigate for ESA impacts. And I'll discuss the PSCs that we've done since the last time we met. And then the endowment and plan preparation charge. So the partners are reimbursed for the amount of local general revenue funds that were put in towards plan development. So over time, we'll write, we were discussing how we're going to start to implement this today on the phone, but we're looking at probably doing a yearly check will be distributed to the 6 partners. It's not a significant amount. It's 1.24% at this point. So we're also, yes, I should have said it'll stay steady, yeah. Oh, we haven't determined at what rate we will be paying it back. So I don't think we'll take the full 50 years. We're talking about probably doing it over 10 or 20 years. And if revenues are really good, maybe we can just do it all in one shot. Yep. So we're also going to apply for several grants. So these are just sort of estimates of what we hope will happen. So they're included in the revenue projections, but keep in mind we may not get these grants. The local assistant grants for research and monitoring, the WCB grant in Section 6 for acquisitions, and other grant sources, the majority of them would be for restoration and acquisition. And some land management, like with barred goat grass, there seems to be some programs that they'll help fund the eradication of that, which is a problem in the serpentine soil systems. So this will give you the sort of, and I got some updated numbers that I can talk to you about on this that you'll get even before the governing board gets. So this is the budget estimate for 2014-15 when we did the mid-budget year review. Was we thought total revenues were going to be slightly more than 7.3 million. Originally, last year's budget projections was 14 million, but there were a couple big projects in San Jose that just didn't happen. And so we did a mid-year budget adjustment, which we felt. So the estimated actual we assumed was going to be 6.2. It's actually going to be closer to 8 million. So we are going to exceed our budget estimates from the mid-year budget review in January. So there were a couple large projects in San Jose that did come through, including some development on Communication Hill off of 87. So the 15-16 budget estimates, and these are based in input we got from our partner agencies and what they thought would happen next year, are slightly more than 12 million. And then we're estimating that we'll get 3.1 million in grants. So for a total estimated revenues of 15,162,000. And you could see in the pie chart below the projected revenue funding by category. So you can see that Burrowing Owl and land cover fees are the greatest. There's a couple big projects in San Jose that'll impact Burrowing Owl habitat, and that's why that number is so high.
I want to come back to grant funding for a moment.
Yes.
The 3.1 million. So, I mean, we all know grant funding is always a bit
Yes.
dicey.
Yes.
How are you, do you have essentially a plan B if we
No.
don't get this funding?
No, we don't have a plan B. So I'm cautiously optimistic we'll get the 2 million section 6. We will get at least, I'm guessing, at least 1 or 2 lag grants. So I think 2.1 is safe.
Okay.
The other million, though, like you said, you can't, nothing's guaranteed. The other million is a hope that we can get some funding from WCB or a foundation.
Now, it seems that this, like you said, is the majority is from the report here. This is for land acquisition, then a small amount, considering the total, for scientific research. So in your mind, have you sort of already squared away where you want to see this move to, this land acquisition? Because, I mean, it's a category versus
Yes.
where you're hoping to put it within that category.
Yes, so correct me if I'm wrong, so you're wondering how much we're earmarking for 10 million for land acquisition.
And in part of that 10 million is the 3 million, so if you come short, I mean, is the 2 million?
Yeah, the 2 million, the one, no.
Yeah.
But the 2, we're sort of anticipating getting the 2.
Okay, and in your EO report, I guess we're going to find out more about where you'd like to put that.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions? And this is sort of projected appropriations, so sort of where the money will be spent. And you can see where we were in our projections in January, where we ended up being in estimated actual, which actually would be a little bit higher than that. I think it's going to be about 1.4. We'll know when we get the final calculations from the county. But we spent less than we thought we were going to, based on our mid-year budget projections. And you can see that the 15-16, we're going to be, appropriations are going to be nearly 2 million, 1.9 million. And you can see how it's broken down. So administrative support, a lot of that is with hiring the new person, which over time we're hoping will save the agency money as we phase out the consultants. But currently there's going to be some overlap there. The technical permitting support, a lot of that has to do with implementing the plan, working with the local governments on processes, and trying to get the water regulatory processes, the 404 and the 401 processes aligned with the plan, so we have more of a one-stop shopping for permitting. Then we have the conservation strategy implementation, so that's the Burrowing Owl plan, that's restoration work, and I can get into more detail on that if you'd like. So this is how it's broken down, administrative support and grant services. So you can see office staffing, that's our budget analyst and the new person for 15-16. And my compensation is reflected there also. Then we have legal services, financial services, and we just in the process of renegotiating some of the services that the Morgan Hill provides us. So we do expect that number to drop for clerk of the board services, which is really broadly defined there, but it includes IT stuff and other things too, rent. It's just all under that category. Angie's not going away. She's still going to be our clerk of the board. So compliance tracking and annual reporting, then grant coordination and preparation. Part of that is grant writing, having somebody write the grants. We also have a contract with the county to help us with finding grants that we can apply for, and they're going to help with the preparation of grant applications. And so the total contractual services, as you can see, is $458,000 for that administrative support function, and the total is $1,033,000. So this is the technical and permitting support, and you can see how it's broken down.
I have a question
yes.
on the other administrative expenses.
Yes.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on the public outreach, what that entails?
Let's see, where are we on there? So the other expenses.
Other administrative expenses, yeah, it's third from the bottom. Public
Okay.
outreach, 10,000. I'm just.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So part of that is publications like brochures, webpage.
Okay.
We're in the process of having a Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Okay, so you need obviously somebody
Yeah.
who's handling that.
Setting
social
up
media.
that.
Yeah.
It's also me going to Washington to lobby for continued funding for HCPs.
Oh, so
Yes.
so advocacy versus public outreach?
Correct.
So your time in going to
So
Washington's under public outreach versus advocacy?
Let's see. Are you looking at, so you're looking at one of the spreadsheets, right?
Yeah, so I am on, let me see, I'm looking on page 13.
Page 13.
Yeah, and it has contractual services, and
Yeah,
which you just went through, and then,
there's more detail here, so let me look at page 13. So you're talking in the booklet, correct?
yeah,
Packet.
I mean, I understand, I
Yeah,
have no
yeah.
qualms with the work, I just want to understand how that's
Okay,
being.
so advocacy is the 3, and the public outreach no, they are not combined.
Yeah,
They-
exactly. So
right.
I'm trying to understand. So just like I said, for my own edification,
Yeah.
your trips to Washington are not considered advocacy?
No. Yeah, no, they're under advocacy. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Just clarifying that thing.
Yeah, I'm going off the presentation where things are combined.
Yeah, okay.
But here, yeah, so you're looking at the more detailed, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Not a problem. I just,
Yes.
for my own self, I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, and splitting those out came out of the budget workshop. Doug suggested, and I thought it was a good
it makes
idea.
plenty of sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to sort of split out
Absolutely.
what's what. So the public outreach is more of that traditional stuff that you would think of. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And so now, and I'll keep this open. So if you have more specific questions related to the budget document, I do now have it open in the appropriate section, so I can look at both the presentation and this. So this is the technical and permitting support, and you can see how it's broken down. With the technical assistance, this is plan interpretation and implementation. So this is a lot of the day-to-day operations of creating the forms and developing the policies. And it's a combination of sort of consultants helping me out, and in some cases we have the local partners doing some of the work, like with information management. And then you can see the water permitting. That's the integration that I spoke of. So this is the conservation strategy implementation. So we're set aside $260,000 for wetlands restoration and creation. So that's both construction and another design project next year, or this fiscal year. And then there's land enrollment, reserve system creation. So as assessing other properties, we now have a realtor working for us, going out, trying to find other properties with willing sellers, and we have to assess whether those properties should be included in the reserve system. And then there's the whole process of doing the conservation easements, so there's and developing all the management plans associated with enrolling lands into the reserve system, and that's falling in that category. And then we have the monitoring, adaptive management, and reserve system management planning, which is creating a management plan for all the reserve systems, sort of a one big template, and then developing individual management plans for each of the properties that will be enrolled in the reserve system. And we're in the process of developing that now. And here you can see the fee breakdown on both the endowment and the plan prep, and what it's estimated to be based on projected revenues. Thank you.
And then an especially nice slide.
Yes, I thought you'd appreciate that. Yeah.
Any comments from the public? Questions? Okay. And so we've accomplished our review. And Ed, you have a officer report?
I do. So the first thing is sort of to update you a little bit on the advocacy. Went to Washington in March. It's organized by the HCP Coalition, that John Hopkins, the conference that's done in Vacaville every year. It's the same individual, and he gets all the California partners who both in Southern and Northern California together, and we go to Washington and lobby our representatives to continue to fund HCPs. We also met with several of the agencies responsible for conservation funding, including the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to keep this on their radar, to keep robust funding for HCPs. We also did a similar thing last year with the state. We met with a lot of the state representatives to NCCPs were hot in the 90s. There's a lot of other trendy things going on in the state, other priorities that are now on the Director Bonham's priority list. So we met with him to keep the idea fresh that these are important, these are relevant, this is ecosystem management, this is landscape ecology, and trying to get funding, cap and trade dollars to be earmarked for NCCP implementation, and that in some of the water bonds and other the park bonds, that monies would be set aside for NCCP land acquisition. We had some success with the park bond, not so much success with cap and trade. Dollars were not specifically earmarked for NCCPs, but we can certainly apply for those funds just like anybody else, but we'll be in the competitive mix. So, and a lot of the, for better or worse, a lot of the cap and trade dollars are going towards the bullet train, so high-speed rail. And I won't comment on that, but so when we were in Washington and met with Senators Feinstein and Boxer, not them personally, but their staff, and we also met with the region's congressional delegation, as well as senior agency staff. in conjunction, I'll sort of segue into the regional general permit process. I met with U.S. Army Corps headquarters staff in D.C. to express our displeasure with how our RGP application has not been managed, I should say. We can say how it's been mismanaged. So that's taking up a great deal of my time over these last 6 months, putting a ton of pressure on the San Francisco District Office to grant us a regional general permit for we can combine 404 and ESA mitigation and use the money towards restoration of waters of the U.S. in the reserve system. It's been a struggle. Our partners to the north have a regional general permit, but they went through the San Francisco District Office. The San Francisco District Office is not run the same way as the Sacramento office. So I have a whole bunch of things here that I can go over if you'd like, but it's a litany of meetings with generals and colonels, and we're finally getting some traction here, and I believe we'll get a regional general permit completed application and this fall. Yes. We currently are, but we want assurances from Lieutenant Colonel Morrow and General Toy that they will meet the original intent of what was promised to this agency when Ken was around on what actually is a regional general permit and how effective it will be, and will be a useful tool for both public and private project proponents. So we're still going through the San Francisco District, but we've been putting a lot of pressure on the Corps. If they can't deliver, then we want our application transferred to the LA District or the Sacramento District. And we've had some preliminary discussions with the Sacramento District, and they seem to be willing to do it if we can't work it out here. I'm hoping we can work it out here. We've made a lot of progress in the last 3 months, but it has been through political pressure and the county lobbyist has been very helpful, Chris Mitchell. We worked with Honda's office and there was a letter written to Major General Peabody by the delegation saying, what the heck's going on? I did get a phone call from General Toy in June apologizing for all the delays that have happened. So things are starting to happen. We are making good progress. The positive thing of this is it sort of gets away from piecemeal mitigation and fragmentation, and we still need to integrate the 401 process. So where in more urbanized environments, conservation and may not make sense, and or restoration may not make sense. So if we can get the Corps and the regional board to agree to more of a true watershed approach, where you look at the watershed sort of in the big picture sense and not in terms of there's a tree next to a bridge and we want you to plant a new tree next to that bridge, which is fine if the jurisdiction wants a new tree planted, but that's not really mitigation to impacts to the waters of the U.S. or the waters of the state, and trying to collect those fees and truly implementing ecosystem restoration in areas that have been impacted by development of a different sort, whether it was agriculture or mining or roads and sort of going back and restoring the landscape and the benefit to the private and public project proponents is that on these impacts that are small, like bridge replacements, culvert replacements, they aren't caught in a labyrinth of delays that sometimes take 12 to 18 months just to get a permit from the Corps for doing a simple bridge replacement project. And a lot of times there's public safety issues that seem to be ignored, or I shouldn't say they're ignored, but given the delays, they're so trying to streamline the process and have more of a landscape approach to restoration. So that's the goal.
Have you touched base with Zoe Lofgren's office?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I met with her staff in Washington. His staff is taking the lead, but they're coordinating with SU and Lofgren. Yep.
Because she has probably going to have a longer tenure in Congress after this next election.
So you think Honda may not?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, he doesn't begin to have the money that is being thrown against him.
Okay.
But he could do it again. But I thought he would retire after he won last time.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be an uphill battle.
That's good to know. That's my sense too. So we're going to meet hopefully with General Toy and Colonel Morrow sometime in August. I sent an email to General Toy and he's agreed to meet with us. It's just coordinating his schedule with our schedule. So PSC update, there's going to be a Caltrans, two Caltrans projects, one for just road maintenance and another for a wetland restoration project they're doing on OSA land. And they just need some plan coverage for both those activities. They're also submitting a Heckard, even though Heckard Pass is currently being constructed, the road improvements are being made, they need to mitigate their impacts to red-legged frog and tiger salamander, and they're going to use the plan as a vehicle to do that.
That project is nearing completion, so they're putting the cart before the horse?
Oh, yes. This is the BO's already been done, biological opinion's already been done on the project, so we're just assisting them with mitigating their project impacts. So instead of them going to a mitigation bank, they'll use the plan, and both Caltrans and PG&E are doing that for projects so it's sort of post mitigation, and the wildlife agencies are okay with this, and it helps them to mitigate their project impacts quicker. In the case of Hecker Pass, it's 33 acres of impact. So when we buy land, let's say we buy a 600-acre property, 33 acres of that will be set aside for the Hecker Pass project. It won't count towards our reserve system, but they'll help with managing that land, and then basically their money will go towards buying part of that land. But it'll be tracked separately, separate mitigation process. Yeah.
Is the PG&E project, is that also Hecker Pass?
No, PG&E, there's pipeline projects.
The gas pipeline
Yes.
that exists?
Correct. And that's a not post mitigation. That's like Gavilan. They're mitigating for things that are happening today. So they're using the PSC process the same way Gavilan did, or some of those other projects that came in under Ken's watch. So, but they are doing a mitigation only for bay checker spot butterfly and red-legged frog. It's temporary impact, so they parked their truck on serpentine soils, and they had a staging area, and then they restored the land to the way. Well, they didn't really do much to it, but so they're using the plan to mitigate for temporary impacts of serpentine soils and red-legged frog habitat, and that's post mitigation also.
So that work is complete?
It's complete, yes.
So is the work being done on the pipeline or being contemplated, or maybe it is already done, but there was mention of a similar problem as existed in San Ramon at a specific site west of Morgan Hill.
The pipeline, they're doing those hydro testing because of what happened in San Bruno. So
San Bruno, yes.
Yes, so they're checking their whole system. Those are going through the traditional PSC process. So they can't do anything until they get a permit from us to do it. These other projects were existing BOs that they couldn't mitigate for them. They had like 12 acres of temporary impacts, and the fees were relatively low, and they couldn't buy any property anywhere. So they were stuck, and the wildlife agencies, mainly the Fish and Wildlife Service, asked us if we could help PG&E get out of this conundrum of they tried to buy some land near Tulare Hill, and the landowner wants a lot of money for it. So they were stuck. So they came to us and said, hey, can you help them with this problem, because they can't solve their mitigation problem. So they're using the plan to sort of mitigate for something that happened in the past. And that's the same thing with Heckard Pass and Ferguson Road. So we're in Ferguson Road, we did an agreement with PG&E or with Caltrans that they impacted upland habitat for frogs and salamanders. So in the future, we'll, just like with Heckard Pass, we'll buy land that'll be specifically earmarked for their mitigation. And it's only small stuff. We're not equipped to handle if someone came in with a several hundred acre mitigation project and they wanted us to do one of these agreements, we would need a lot more than the plan prep fees. We would need help with actual upfront management of that land, and a separate endowment would have to be established and all that sort of stuff. And we're not in the business of doing that. But with this, with these small impacts, it's manageable, and it'll help us buy some property. Some of which will be set aside for mitigation specifically for their projects.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yes.
You're kind of addressing something I was kind of curious about too, and that is if they're then paying in essentially, and then maybe the habitat plan would acquire some land.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would kind of make sense for the plan to also manage that land.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so to me, kind of having them also pay into like some kind of endowment,
Yes.
does seem to kind of like be beneficial to both parties, so they can get off the hook. And also, it's probably better for us to be able to just go out with what needs to be done consistent with our conservation strategy.
Correct.
So is that kind of
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it, for us to manage, if we have a 10,000 acre preserve and to manage another, in the case of the two Caltrans projects, be about 42 acres. It doesn't, for us to manage another 42 acres is no big deal.
But it would be nice to get that, formally, the additional down.
Oh yeah, no,
they're
they're paying the endowment.
Okay.
Towards the endowment, and they're paying. We also charge them a surcharge of 10% of the total fees, which is sort of an application fee.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the case of this one we're going to do with Caltrans, it's another $17,000 plus they're paying the endowment too, and we'll invest that money along with all the other money that we're doing, and that'll help towards in perpetuity management of the land. Yep. And so now I'm going to get a little bit, so there's a couple other projects in the pipeline, Los Gatos Creek Bridge project in the city of San Jose. It's not the historic bridge.
Not the Willow Glen Trust.
Right.
Don't step there.
Yeah.
It's what everyone keeps telling me. And then there were 2 OSA restoration projects that went to the governing board in June that were approved. And these were just small projects, restoration projects that they needed ESA coverage for. Now with land enrollment, I got some good news to report. So UTC Coyote Ridge, so we're co-acquiring that property with OSA. $5.7 million of the funding for that acquisition was a result of the plan. I mean, OSA went out and got the money. They did all the hard work getting the funding, but it was the existence of the plan that allowed them to get 2/3 of the funding for that project. So the conservation easement was agreed to by OSA and the Habitat Agency in July 15th. And then the conservation easement was approved by the OSA board on July 23rd. And their approval of that easement ensures that it'll be enrolled in the reserve system. And we would not have a butterfly strategy if that property was not acquired and enrolled in the reserve system. There were some assurances OSA wanted for the Bay Ridge Trail, which are included in the conservation easement. It was some really tough negotiations that went on because, as you can imagine, multiple funders all have different expectations, wildlife agencies, OSA, everybody. But in the end, we reached an agreement. It was almost an 11th hour agreement. And it'll go to our board in September, and then the escrow will close on the property in October, and then the easement conservation easement will be recorded soon after that. So it'll be the first property enrolled in the reserve system, 1,831 acres. It is ground zero for the butterfly and a lot of the rare plants.
Well, woohoo.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
That's great.
Yeah, it's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Calero Park, we're hoping to have that, and that's that land in lieu. So the Coyote Ridge is an acquisition. So that's like new conservation. Calero Park, we're going to enroll over 2,000 acres of Calero and San Vicente, which makes up Calero. And that's part of that land in lieu, where the county is offering up this property in lieu of fees. And what we do then is manage it where conservation then takes the priority over recreation. I mean, there's existing recreation, but what we will do is use habitat fees to manage that land for the species and restore habitat for the species. So it'll be kind of like a conservation park of sorts. I mean, the county does a great job managing their land, but a lot of times their focus is, is recreation. That's part of their charter. And I think they do a fantastic job, but now we're going to be funneling monies to them and basically requiring them to manage the land for butterflies and the plants and the frogs and the salamanders. So it'll now be managed more with a focus towards the species and the habitat.
Okay, so like you, TC, you had to come to a conservation easement, or you had to come to an
Yes.
easement agreement, so this will be this similar
Yeah,
with
exactly.
county parks, because
Yes.
we're thinking, obviously, as you said, part of county parks is access.
Yeah.
But in some of these areas, maybe there was access before, and we want to restrict that access because of the restoration and the conservation that wants to be done. So,
Correct. So we went out with county park staff, the wildlife agencies, and the habitat agencies, and we worked with them on where the new trails on San Vicente will go. And they were, as was OSA, very, very sensitive to the fact that this is now going to become part of a wildlife refuge, essentially. So in making multiple use work, hopefully. So yes, there'll be a conservation easement placed on that land also. That'll be approved by the county SUPs and then by our implementation board. Yeah.
So do you anticipate the continuing uses there, such as the recreation around the lake, the boating, the fishing, the picnicking?
Those lands around the lake will not be enrolled in the reserve system.
Okay.
Yeah, because of their
Lake itself would be?
no, yes.
Because I can just see a
Yes.
public relations nightmare.
Yes.
Is that, that we shut down people recreating.
No, the lake and the lands around the lake will not be the immediate lands around the lake, and part of that is because the lake level is going to change. But right. If they can fix the dam, and but in the immediate vicinity of the lake, as the lake levels rise, we're hoping to do some restoration because there's a tricolored blackbird population that's now using, I think it's around 200 birds are using some of the tule and cattail marsh areas for nesting. So as the lake levels rise, we want to basically, near that very location, is restore habitat for the tricolored blackbird as the lake levels rise. So those are the kind of things we can do now, and with enrolling this in the reserve system, where before, if it wasn't enrolled in the reserve system, we wouldn't have those assurances that we need and the wildlife agencies need that this land would be managed for the benefit of the species in perpetuity. And we're also doing a pond restoration and a wetland restoration out there. We hired H.T. Harvey and Seebeck to do the restoration design work for out at Clara. And again, it's something we couldn't have done if this property wasn't going to be enrolled in the reserve system. It's very much a belt and suspenders thing with the wildlife agencies. They really hold us to a high standard, and that's why all these conservation easements and approval process that we have with everything we do. So we're all.
I get
yes.
questions about this occasionally.
Yes.
And my response to the question is, the question is, me as a hiker or a horseback rider or whatever, am I going to even know the difference if land is turned over? And my response has always been, and I want to know if this is correct. You're a hiker, you're a bicyclist, you're a horseback rider. Probably won't even be aware that there's been any change in status, given the language that was written into the plan to support kinds of passive recreation activities.
I believe you're correct. Yeah.
So I'm going to keep telling people that.
Yes. Yeah. Ed says. So Coyote Ridge would be a good example because that's very fresh in my mind, in the Bay Ridge Trail. So we worked with OSA to site new trails on the property, and there were some things that they agreed to. Okay, all right, no, we don't have to do the trail there. Okay, we're willing to move it a little bit here. And if somebody really understood plant communities, they would be able to see what'll happen over time. And OSA is already doing some of that. And like barred goat grass and invasive species management, it'll be much. So I should say UTC was doing a lot of that. It wasn't OSA. Sorry. So UTC's been a good steward of that land since they shut down the rocket operations, and but OSA and the agency want to continue the work that UTC did and build upon it and do more intensive invasive species management and managing the serpentine habitat for the plants and the butterflies. So what you will see if you really understood plant communities, you say, wow, I don't see too much barred goat grass and I don't see any star thistle out there. And so I think that's what you'll see. And you might see, if we restore a pond, you'll see that there's more structure there for the frogs and salamanders and what they need to breed. So, but the average layperson, and no disrespect meant to them, probably wouldn't, you know.
Well, I think the average layperson is more concerned about just restrictions,
Yes.
right? And I don't think we,
No.
would be enforcing any different policies regarding that.
No, it'll be, obviously we don't want people to stray from the trails, but it'll be what OSA and county parks are currently doing in managing access at their properties. If anything, it might be a little more restrictive, but the existing trails, nothing's going to change. People are going to be able to hike on the Bay Ridge Trail once it's constructed, and so, yeah. So Coyote Valley is also going to be enrolled in the reserve system, and it like Calero, is an offset for fees that OSA would envision having to pay. So they're enrolling that property, and it has occurrences of both the plants and the butterfly. There's also the potential for salamanders and red-legged frogs, giving the proximity to known occurrences of both. And in the perfect world, maybe we'd have burrowing owls nesting out there in the future. I'm not holding my breath, but it is the right kind of habitat for them, at least the more lowland areas of Coyote Valley Park. We also are collaborating with PG&E on acquiring land, because they have mitigation needs. We don't have a lot of money in the bank right now, so if we can acquire a property with them, and again, this is where what you were saying earlier, Jan, that they'd have to set up an endowment, they'd have to help us with interim management costs, because if we're going to acquire let's say a 700-acre parcel, and half of it will go towards their mitigation needs, half towards ours. They will pay us to manage that land, and they understand that. So it's good for them, because then they can pre-mitigate, because they're doing a Bay Area HCP that'll hopefully be ready within the next couple years. And this would be pre-mitigation, so not post-mitigation, but pre-mitigation for their HCP, NCCP. And actually, I think it's just an HCP they're doing. So so we're working with them to leverage their money to acquire land. So I'm excited that we're getting into this partnership with them, and it means we got to give up something. So really important properties like Coyote Ridge, the UTC property, we can't share that in a way, at least not on a grand scale. But when you're talking about red-legged frog and salamander habitat, we can share some of that with another entity like PG&E. Because we don't need, the take coverage is a little more flexible with that, and how we acquire land and protect those species. So now to talk about the private property negotiations, and both these things were agendized with the implementation board and the governing board. So this is, I can't get into details about negotiations, but there is, we're currently in negotiations with the Lamont family, Dr. James Lamont. His property is its proximity is right next to Sierra Vista, the OSA property. It's not far from Grant Park. Part of the property includes Cherry Flat Reservoir, and we're in negotiations with his representatives to acquire that property. And I'm cautiously optimistic. We are things are going well. So then the big kahuna, the rest of UTC. So we're doing an appraisal on that property right now. So the balance, the Shingle Valley portion of that, and They submitted an appraisal to us that we don't agree with their conclusions. Yes. Yeah, so that's what we're calling it, to just, so instead of UTC Coyote Ridge, we're calling it UTC Shingle Valley.
Where is that?
Yeah, so if you go up Metcalf Road and you pass the county motorcycle park,
Yeah.
it's a few miles from there. So it's where their gate used to be. The O'Connell Ranch borders it, and it's amazing habitat for the frogs and salamanders. There's also a lot of cool species that are not covered by the plan that are there, like all the raptors you can think of, and species of concern like the badger, and future species that might be listed like the Thompson's big-ear bat have the potential to be there. There are a lot of bats there. UTC did a lot of bat restoration work out there, so there's some pretty cool things that they've done. They have been a great steward of the property. It's an active cleanup site, so there's some negotiations that'll have to take place with them in terms of indemnifying the agency and our partners from any future liability associated with the cleanup of the property. So we're doing a counter appraisal, which they agreed that they were okay with us doing that, and hopefully we can reach some sort of long-term purchase agreement with them where we can agree on price. And it'll be an expensive acquisition where we're talking to others to help fund it. So, and those are we also hired a realtor to work with us to try to find other properties, and he's out banging on doors, and there's some hopeful signs that some lands not far from Lamont and not far from Calero there might be some willing sellers associated with some other properties. But the two big and the ones that are the ones I mentioned. So we will be submitting a Section 6 grant, as I mentioned, and then the Reserve Land Management and Monitoring Plan for the reserve system lands is in progress. So this is sort of like the to-do book on how to manage our properties. And hopefully that'll be done next year, early next year. So we're working with the City of San Jose on a management agreement for their regional wastewater facility, Burrowing Owl lands. Something like along the lines we did with Warm Springs unit of Don Edwards. So I'm hoping we'll get that agreement done later this year, early next year, where we'll provide funding to them to continue to manage the land, because their funding's about to run out, that they'll continue to manage the land holistically for the burrowing owls. And right now, that's the one success story with the burrowing owls is that property. We're working banding the owls out there as we speak to try to get a better sense of how they move around the region. So I know the city wants to do it, but sometimes these things unfortunately take time. Yeah. So we're also initiating discussions with Steelware concerning management of burrowing owl mitigation site in North San Jose, and that's not far from the Baylands area. It's landfill land that was partially developed. There's more development that's going to occur on it. It's very close to the regional wastewater facility. Currently, there's not any burrowing owls out there. We met with some of their consultants and their lead person to try to see if we can work with them to manage the set-aside area more holistically for the burrowing owl, get them to mow more frequently, and they were very open to everything we were talking about. There's many partner organizations that are part of this private entity that is Steelware, and the development projects that are going on out there. So they need to get a blessing from all their partners, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we can work out some agreement with them. They have agreed to manage the land more in keeping with the original mitigation plan that was set up with the city of San Jose. Audubon Society, I've got to give them kudos for helping with arranging the meeting with Steelware, and I'm hoping that something will come of this.
This is the old landfill where Lafayette runs straight into Olviso.
You know, I don't know that area really well. But it is in that area. It's not far from Elviso. There's a lot of new commercial development. There's a hotel planned out that way.
There's a couple active dumps, but this one was abandoned 10 or more years ago.
Okay.
And I know I'm just thinking of that because I know I saw last spring, I think there was some fencing that had been put up.
Okay.
That said, don't go beyond this burrowing owl habitat.
It's got to be the same area. Yep. And unfortunately, I don't think there was any ill intent, but I just think the land wasn't being managed quite correctly for the birds. And they were great to talk to. They were very open to our ideas.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And let's see. I mentioned hiring of H.T. Harvey. The public land in Luffy will go to the IB in September. We're in the final stages of completing a conditions implementation guide for covered activities. That's sort of like the handbook that the local governments will use to help. They're implementing things now, but we're creating a formal handbook for their staff to use. Yeah.
We are here.
Yes, exactly. And as I mentioned, we also are beginning the recruitment process for the Habitat Conservation Specialist / Principal Program Manager. And the Black Mountain Financial Accounting and Tracking Software integration will be completed this month, and it'll go live in September. And that'll help us with keeping tracks of where the fees are going, and it'll allow us to provide better reports to you on where the money's going and how it's being spent.
Right.
That's it.
Great.
Want to thank you very much for a very thorough report that included a lot of nuggets of information and some big nuggets too. So can you make sure that we do in fact get emailed, your written report? And if your report could also be entered into the minutes under the executive officer report, so when someone is doing a Google search for something that you mentioned, and they go maybe to 40 items down, but it's got what you mentioned is of interest to, I think, of a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, and I'll send that to Angie tonight.
Thank you.
And then she can forward it on to you.
Other comments on the report?
That was great. Very
Thank
high
you.
quality, content heavy.
Thank
Love
you.
it.
Well, we haven't met since January, right, or February, and I owed you this, so and a lot is starting to happen. Yeah.
Okay, and so do we have any comments from the public on any item that's not on the agenda? Okay, and then so our next meeting is scheduled for November 5 here, 6 o'clock, and no other business?
I just wanted to ask, because you weren't certain who was going to be showing up. Was there because I don't remember being asked if I was gonna, did I RSVP? Did you ask for RSVPs on this meeting? Did we get those?
I did not for this meeting.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, it's a tough one because it's summer and we know people are off. So,
I did get an email from Richard who said he was going to be out of town.
yeah, okay.
Well, especially when we don't meet that often, it's, could be one of those cases out of sight, out of mind too, so. I think the reminders probably really help a lot.
We can do that.
Because
Yeah.
it's, every 3 months, it's hard to,
Yeah.
Well,
on my calendar, but.
Right, but the last governing board or it was governing board.
Oh, yeah.
Where we were on the phone for a while, and then we had San Jose councilman come in, who then was replaced by another San Jose councilman, and it was almost like musical chairs.
It was.
And it was your review that was on the agenda.
It was my review, the approval of the budget, big stuff. Those PSE applications, yeah. It was big stuff, yeah.
Okay, so we're adjourned,
Yes,
7:35.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walt.
Thank y'all.
thank you.
I've been reading this book, American History, and you always hear about the art of